gone to Afghanistan as a young man before the Soviet Union even invaded Afghanistan in the 1980s, so I had an understanding and love of the country and of the culture. Secondly, I went as a young newspaper reporter, the New York Times, in the early 1980s, and I lived with various members of the Mujahideen, holy warriors, our allies fighting the Soviet Union, the most important of whom was a man named Jalaluddin Haqqani. Today, he is the leader of the most powerful, the most lethal, the most violent, and the most effective anti-American insurgency or insurgent group, part of the Taliban, closely allied with al-Qaeda. 25 years ago, he was our ally. After 9/11, I was hired by CBS and I became their Afghan, Pakistan consultant, and I found myself saying, I have to go back and see if I can find these men with whom I lived before. And I wanted to get to the Taliban leaders who had been my friend, who had taken care of me before, to see why and how he had changed. I had been living along the border for months now, crossed over now and then somewhat, so I didn't consider myself naive at all. I knew I was going into the most dangerous place in the world for an outsider, particularly for an American. I knew from the 1980s that I could disguise myself as a Pashtun, as a member of the Taliban, as an Afghan. I knew how to tie a turban. I knew how to wear a hat. My beard was long, I was skinny, I was out in the sun for days, weeks, months. I understood the tribal code called Pashtunwali. Pashtuns are the people, the largest ethnic group in Afghanistan and across the border in Pakistan. The Taliban are Pashtuns. We got out, and the driver came close to me, and I could see that his eyes were watery. And he kissed me on the cheek. And he said, Pashto, go with God. But I'm almost positive that was a Judas kiss. And I looked up, and I saw movement, a small tinge of black. And all of a sudden, that small black tinge became a turban as a man rose, this tall, lanky man rose, jumped over a rock, and he came running down the hill in front of us, and they spread out, about 12 of them, and they were like Indians in an old Western movie, shouting, "Canna, canna, canna, get down, get down, get down." And I saw this smaller guy in the center. I said, that's the leader. That's the Taliban leader. I'm dead. I'm dead. They set me down on a ridge, facing west. At that time, I was still in shock. They took a turban and they wrapped it around my eyes, and my whole world went very black. Then they picked me up. They grabbed my hand. They dragged me down the mountain, and I fell once, twice. I heard a car engine and got down to the bottom. They opened the car door up. They throw me inside. Oh no, they threw me inside. And we begin to climb. Climb, climb, go over rocks. The tires start to spin. We keep climbing and climbing. They're going to take me up into the mountains, and they're going to kill me alone. And finally we stop. They open the door and they pull me out. And then they take me into a room and they set me down. And then, very slowly, they untie the turban. And I'm not alone. There's my bodyguards and there's my interpreter. And the Taliban commander looks at me. And then a man next to him says, What is your name? I can't keep this up. My language isn't good enough. My accent is obviously horrible. It was something deep inside of me said that if I tell a lie that things are going to go bad, and I give my name, which is clearly not a Pashtun name, and I said, I'm American. I had to convince them, as best I could, that I was not a spy, and that I was a journalist, and that I was a writer, and I was there to tell their story. They said, we're going to investigate you. And if we find that you have been invited here, as your bodyguards say, we'll let you go. But if not, we will judge you under Sharia, Islamic law. A spy, Sharia, would be the end. And so they left. And then I looked around me at the walls. I looked for blood on the walls. I looked over on the floor and I saw chains and a stake in the ground. And I said, I am in a Taliban prison, deep in the mountains of Pakistan. And nobody can find me. For days, I would lie in my cot and I would feel my neck. And I would wonder how long it would take when I was being beheaded before I passed out. How painful would it be? How long would it go before I blacked out? You begin to accept it. What seems horrifying, which seems beyond comprehension, is acceptable. About that same time, a drone appeared overhead. And I could hear every day, 18 hours a day, this low sound, a bit like a lawnmower engine, high up in the air, overhead. Is that drone there for me? Or is that for the Taliban? Were the Americans tracking them? Were they going to shoot a missile at us? Or was the government aware, generally, of where I was, watching me? And he said to me, congratulations on escaping death. And the Taliban commander said, we're going to release you. We're going to be watching you. We know where your families are. We know everything about you. Za, go. And we walked away, and I waited for them to shoot me in the back. We walked, and now it's pitch black. And I fell down, I got up, kept walking, I fell again, I got up. And there was a small pickup truck waiting. Got in the back of the truck. We drove on a dirt road, bumpy dirt road. Kept driving and driving. Finally, I saw a man holding a light, like a man on a railroad here, a lantern going back and forth. I go, oh no, the Taliban. The truck stopped. I said, get out. I got out of the truck. I was so exhausted, I could barely stand. And then a man came out of the darkness, and he held up a CBS. card. The CBS bureau chief. We hugged one another. Are you okay, Jerry? Did they torture you? And I began to feel, for the first time, safe. And the FBI met the plane and they walked me through the airport at JFK, and I'm holding my clothes up because I'm skinny, and we go into a room just off the passport control. And a man next to me puts his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Welcome home, Jerry. Welcome home." I have learned a lot since I've gotten out. I learned that my main contact, the member of parliament today, a former Mujahideen commander, part of that network that I was a part of in the 80s that still exists today, had called the leader of the Taliban group I was supposed to meet with, called him to his house and said, while I was in prison, "Release Jerry and do not harm him." I know the government was involved. As the FBI agent said to me when I asked him about that drone, I said, "Was that there for me? Or was that there for the Taliban?" And he said, "We brought all assets into play." A lot of things have happened. It's very corrosive. It takes a long time. I need to forgive. Otherwise, I'm still in that prison. I'm not quite there yet.